right now. Our Bitcoin holdings cover 3 years of mortgage payment. Our digital credit covers 3 years of mortgage payment. And if you add them together, it's over 6 years of mortgage coverage. So, we're trying to make sure that we have buffers in the event that we have any trouble. And we rather sell stretch in the event that like one of our assets gets stress tested, in the event that we have like a big default or tenants are moving out and we need to find the money to pay the bank, we can liquidate stretch. And that, isn't as painful as selling your Bitcoin. Like we want to make that the last thing we have to do. We want to preserve the Bitcoin for as long as we can.
Hello, this is the Bitcoin Libertarian. Our guest today is Kenny Alves. Kenny is the CEO and co-founder of West Main Self-Storage in Middletown, Rhode Island. Kenny brings over 20 years of hands-on experience in self-storage operation and real estate development. He's leading a family business that's evolved into something truly unique, a 100% climate control solar power storage facility that is also aggressively building a Bitcoin Treasury while accepting Bitcoin payments on chain and via Lightning. West Main isn't just storing people's stuff, it's pioneered what they call hybrid cold storage. Physical self-storage meets digital Bitcoin reserve. With high occupancy, steady cash flow funding, weekly Bitcoin DCA, and big ambitions around capital raises, OTC listing, and eventually NYC with preferred dividends. This is a story of recession resistance, real asset meeting Bitcoin's upside. Kenny, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, to be honest, as I was telling you, it's been a while that I wanted to interview you because we always mention you in our stream in Spanish. And again, as we are a big supporters of Bitcoin Treasury companies, we always mention you as an example you this is the way to go. You don't have to be sailor. You don't have to be accumulating thousands of Bitcoin. You also do the difference, make a difference by accumulating small amount of Satoshis time to time. This is the way to go in Bitcoin for companies, for people, for everyone. So thank you very much for being here. And the first question is, how were you orange pilled?
How was I orange pilled? Okay, well, like everyone, I had heard it from a friend who was in cybersecurity. So I had some acquaintance that I went to high school with. I haven't checked in with him in a while, but he went to the Marines after high school. And when he came back, I bumped into him and he had mentioned something about Bitcoin and magic internet money. And he was in cybersecurity, so he was kind of into, technology and everything. And so I gave it a quick look and was skeptical, and that was my first kind of experience with it. And I disregarded it for years. And I remember seeing the news of Mount Gox afterwards, and I was like, oh, I'm glad I didn't get involved in that. And then something that just kept like reminding me to check on it. And I had checked it again, and it had gone down quite a bit. And so I really had to kind of orange pill myself. I was like, what's going on with this thing? It was at like $1,000. And so I was just very curious. I was on my way to being a gold bug, I like to say. I was like learning about the history of gold at that time. I was buying silver because gold was still a little expensive. And, the curiosity just got the best out of me. And I went down this orange pill, like rabbit hole, but it took like a long time, and it didn't click right away. And, but I don't really have anyone to really say they truly orange pilled me. I had someone that suggested I give it a look, but nothing really more than that.
Excellent. And tell me about your business. Your business is self-storage.
Yeah. I work for my family's business. My father started it. He started as a real estate developer. so totally vertically integrated in the sense that we acquire land and property, and then do whatever general contracting needed to develop it as a property developer, and then operate it and manage it as an owner. And so we we had this warehouse property. It was our least performing property in the portfolio, and we were looking for the best use case. And we operate another self storage facility in Massachusetts, and that is more of a traditional drive up type of storage facility that you see, non climate control, and that those are like the traditional storage units. And yeah, we saw an opportunity where everyone was requesting and going for climate control. And at a time where multi-level facilities wasn't very popular, we researched it, and we ultimately went with a three-level interior climate control facility. So every unit is climate controlled, um, and it allows us to operate more efficiently. It allows us to provide better service, at a better cost. Um, and we look at every way to improve the business, and we ultimately discovered solar. And because we have the expertise as a general contractor, we were able to hire electrical an electrical contractor and order the materials from a wholesale electrical supplier, and develop the solar as well, which offsets our energy use. And we actually installed a second solar array, which all the power from that is sold back to the utility company. So it's a what we call an ancillary income stream. It's a secondary income stream for us. So we have our um, rental income from the storage units, and then we have some income that comes in from the solar panels. And because we're always looking for a way to optimize, that's what led us to Bitcoin. Bitcoin, if we save in Bitcoin, our savings will appreciate and purchasing power. And even more recently, we've started allocating to digital credit. Um, right now, we own about 10,000 shares of Strategies Stretch, and that allowed us to generate an additional 15% to our NOI, because there's no drag with it, right? Like when you build storage units, there's maintenance costs, there's property taxes, there's heating and cooling expenses, and with the digital products, they have zero drag. So we're just constantly looking to be the most efficient storage facility that we can and offer the best service. And Bitcoin is key to offering the best service. We have to provide that as an option for our customers to pay, if that's going to help them, or if that's what they would like to do. Not that we have many clients doing that yet, but we're there to, if it gets their attention, right? We have a sign on the door like Bitcoin's accepted here, and some people get curious, and we're like, we get to educate them and point them in the right direction. And if they decide that they want to, we can accept Bitcoin for a payment. And it's just like an easy way to kind of introduce it to our community.
And when and how did you started with the Bitcoin Treasury company or the Bitcoin Treasury strategy for your company? That was your idea? You have to convince your dad, or your dad was also involved into Bitcoin?
So I had orange pilled my immediate family, my brother, my father, my mother, and we were all Bitcoiners, but we never talked about it to anybody, right? We just do it on our own. We keep quiet, and we were just kind of not very open about it. And we saw a lot of companies starting to, adopt Bitcoin, and we saw it become more mainstream, and we didn't want to sit by and not participate. We felt, hey, this is an opportunity for us to be public about, our views on Bitcoin and how we think it's a superior way to save your time and energy. And, if we as business people in our community, publicly vouch for Bitcoin, maybe it gives somebody else the courage to adopt Bitcoin, another business, another individual. And, it's just a way to co-sign your support for Bitcoin by publicly building in public and voicing your support for it in public.
Yes, interesting. And you also accept Bitcoin as payments. How many people, as per now, they pay you in Bitcoin?
None regularly. We had some people try it. One tenant said, "I know what you want to do. You want to take my Bitcoin. You want." She was more interested in keeping the Bitcoin, kind of like Sears law, right? Like she wanted to pay in dollars and she wanted to save in Bitcoin. And I think that's where we are just in general right now. There's been friction with people wanting to use that as a medium of exchange. It seems like people are comfortable holding it as a savings technology right now, but we still got more time and education to talk about the benefits of using it as payment. And we're just there to meet people where they are. Like, we're not trying to oversell it, but it does, appeal to us. Like we would prefer to accept the Bitcoin.
And since you put the sign, we accept Bitcoin, people go and try to ask about Bitcoin. It triggers attention to start some kind of education.
Yeah, we've had several people like ask about it, and we've spent time with them to help them buy their first Bitcoin and test out different wallets and give them, you know, um, educational resources and videos to check out when it comes to taking the next step with self custody and how to use it properly. And we just try to like meet people where they're at. We've had a few people just acknowledge that like that's cool, and but we're just there, and like maybe we're their first point of contact or second point of contact. And maybe it's like the next time they see it at a coffee shop, that's like the time where they finally are, okay, what is this? And like it normally takes people like 7 points of contact before they like build a brand reputation, like, and make it credible. And so the more times people see Bitcoin in the wild, um, the closer they are to kind of maybe investing time to understand it.
Yes, I think that all these things that putting we accept Bitcoin, putting the logo, it triggers attention to the people. And as you say, probably they see in another place, they see online, they see on the television, and they finally, okay, take the time to study and go all in. So you mentioned that your strategy is accumulating Bitcoin and also accumulating stretch, right?
Yeah, we look at Stretch as a way, and just digital credit in general. So, we're starting to see other issuers offer similar products or complementary products, and we see it as a way for cash flow. It's two separate purposes, right? What we realize is if we allocate to like roughly half Stretch and half Bitcoin, we can borrow additional money that we wouldn't normally be able to borrow, but we have a way to service that debt with supplement income from that digital credit. And it also creates a tax shield in a way. So there's like tax implications, and as a real estate company, we get to benefit from the interest deduction on the loan. So any interest payment, and we can do an interest only loan to buy Bitcoin and Stretch, and we service that debt with the dividend income that we get from Stretch, and it complements each other. So it allows us to get Bitcoin we would otherwise not be able to purchase in a responsible kind of way. We don't want to be, borrowing money to buy Bitcoin to hope that it goes up. This allows us to carry the debt. We can't buy as much Bitcoin. We might be able, but we might only be able to buy half or even less, maybe only 25% in some capital raise scenarios. But we do it in an intelligent way where we manage our risk profile, we manage our loan to value, and we're not just looking at against the Bitcoin. We spread it across the real estate and the solar, and we make that just like a portion of our income, and we make sure that we're over collateralized and that we have more than enough money to pay the debt service, so that we have probably like in the 2 to 3 DSCR, debt service coverage ratio. So we want to make sure that we're making like 2 to 3 times as much as our debt payments are. So if we ever had a loss of tenant with like, say our occupancy rate went down with the real estate, we would have ways to cover that loss of income. And we actually have a dashboard with metrics that show right now our Bitcoin holdings cover 3 years of mortgage payment. Our digital credit covers 3 years of mortgage payment. And if you add them together, it's over 6 years of mortgage coverage. So, we're trying to make sure that we have buffers in the event that we have any trouble. And we rather sell Stretch in the event that like one of our assets gets like stress tested. In the event that like we have like a big default or tenants are moving out, and we need to find the money to pay the bank, we can liquidate Stretch, and that you know isn't as painful as selling your Bitcoin. Like we want to make that the last thing we have to do. We want to preserve the Bitcoin for as long as we can, um, and we want to do whatever we can to optimize the real estate business, because you know um, unlike some businesses, our main business is real estate. We're using Bitcoin to become a better real estate business, and we always have to think about what's best for the real estate business, and they complement each other extremely well.
Interesting. And when you say the loans that you take are loans against your Bitcoin or loans in the bank to do the operation?
So we haven't done any loans against our Bitcoin. Right now we have 2 types of loans. We have like a mortgage, like a traditional mortgage from our bank, and then we have non-recourse loans from private lenders. So we've raised capital from private investors at six. We have it listed on our website, so 6.5% roughly, and we have an interest only loan, and we took that money to buy half Bitcoin, half Stretch. And so we make enough money from the Stretch to pay for the loan, and we just extract the Bitcoin, right? And that was the most Bitcoin we've ever been able to accumulate, because up until then, every time we buy Bitcoin, it's from our income from the business. So we have to wait every month until we collect rent money from our tenants, and then we transfer that money into an exchange. We buy the Bitcoin, and we didn't have an opportunity really to buy a large like lump sum of Bitcoin. It's always been dollar cost average, and that's the first kind of way that you think when you start as a business. Like, okay, that's the first way. I just take my profit and I buy Bitcoin. But as you start to do that, we've been doing that for 46 weeks. You start to think of other ways on how you can accumulate Bitcoin. And if you have a long-term vision and you understand what you're buying, you want to buy as much Bitcoin now as you can, because the next halving is already less than 2 years away. And um, you just want to try to work as hard as you can today to secure your Bitcoin future for tomorrow. And this was one way that we found that the risk reward level was appropriate for us, that we could service the debt with the real estate and solar. But now that we have this digital credit, it also provides an extra buffer. It's not that we need that to be able to pay the debt. It's an extra cushion. It's for us to feel comfortable that we're not going too much leverage.
So basically, you have the. I was envisioning the ship that usually Fong Lee uses to say we have this kind of mod to engines to put our strategy. So you also have these different engines in your strategy to keep going on and to make the better business.
Yeah, if anything, we have more buttons and levers to push because we have the real estate and the solar. So, a lot of people say, well, now you're a Bitcoin company. And yes, we adopt Bitcoin, but we think, a lot of people make the analogy like, oh, are you a tech company because you have a website? And it's very similar, because if you believe in Bitcoin, you think every business in the future will save in Bitcoin and have a Bitcoin allocation. So what's different about us is we're a real estate company. And when we do these types of financial engineering, and like to your point, it's not like we're a public corporation. Like maybe one day we can get to that level, but today we're just a private company. And and we have different ways in which we can engineer and capture Bitcoin on our balance sheet. And they may be similar, they may be different, but as a real estate operating company, we get to benefit from, as I was talking about a little while ago, the interest deduction. That's a major tax deduction. A lot of people get involved in real estate because of depreciation and interest tax deductions on loans. And obviously, the real estate appreciates at a decent rate. Um, but there's a lot of tax benefits. And when you use digital credit, that is the most tax efficient treatment of money, return of capital. So that's better than having accelerated depreciation or tax credits. Those are great. Like we got involved in solar energy because they had really good federal tax credits in the United States. They would give you 30% of the total cost of the solar array back to you in year one, and you could write that off. It was like a gift card to the IRS. So if you spend $1 million on solar, you would get $300,000 back in year one that you could spend for your taxes. So it's great as long as you're making money, right? Because you have to have a tax basis, you have to have a tax appetite. With return of capital, you don't need to be making money somewhere else and have something else going on. That money comes in and it's tax deferred until you have all your capital returned to you. So you don't pay any taxes until you get your entire principal back, which is extremely attractive, right? And because of that, it's like, more efficient. And when you blend this with real estate, you have substantial tax savings. It's like amplified tax saving, because it's not, now you have better than accelerated depreciation. You have kind of transformed your rental income in a way into like what we like to think of as digital rent. And when you do that, the digital rent is tax deferred. And so you keep more of your after tax cash flow is greatly improved. It goes from, it can be like as much as 30% in the models that we've run, where our after-tax cash flow goes up significantly. And so we look at all as an operator, right? We're looking at how do we operate our real estate most efficiently? Because we're willing to save in Bitcoin, but we're not willing to like bet the farm is essentially like with and get into a situation where we can't support the debt. We want to be sure that we can pay our debt obligations. And if we switch to some kind of like preferred dividend kind of thing in the future, we want to make sure we can pay those dividends without selling more shares and without doing any of that we have enough coming in today to pay that debt.
Excellent. And how important is for small business? Because again, probably you're a business owner that you see Michael Saylor or 21 or Strive and say, I cannot do this. I'm not a listed company. How important for a small business is to have a Bitcoin treasury strategy, no matter the size, no matter the amount of Bitcoin you purchase a week, a month? How important it is?
It's extremely important that everybody realize that, I like to say there's no moat, because if they buy more Bitcoin than you, that doesn't mean that they have a stronger vote than you, right? I don't know how much of your audience gets into the technical details, but like node runners verify the miner work on the network, and there's like these different branches of the network that cross-examine each other and verify that everybody's in consensus. And that means that no matter how much Bitcoin you have, whether you have 1,000,000 Bitcoin or you have 1 Bitcoin or you have zero point 0.1 Bitcoin, it doesn't matter. The rules are the same for everybody. And if the Bitcoin goes up, say 100%, it went up 100% for everyone, right? Everyone got the same appreciation. And so, yeah, somebody can have more Bitcoin, and what that would allow them to do if they're going to issue, like we look at Strategy and Strive and some of these other companies, and you know, the more Bitcoin they accumulate, the more financial products they can create, because if they're backing it, so to speak, with their Bitcoin, if they're using Bitcoin to power their financial products, they can only be so strong, right? Like if I have 1 Bitcoin and I want to sell you like a preferred stock that's backed 1 Bitcoin to one preferred stock, well, they can issue 800,000, and we can only issue 14 because we have, 14 Bitcoin today. So, but if you change the dial and you play with the levers and you say, hey, they can be, you can choose your own leverage. I don't know if you're familiar with, I'm sure you are because you've been doing this for a long time, but Hal Finney talked about Bitcoin banks, right? And how in the future that they can choose how backed that they are, like what reserve levels that they have. Maybe they're back 10 to 1, maybe another guy's 5 to 1, maybe another guy's 1 to 1, maybe one guy's 1/4 to 1. And so I think, the more issuers, the better. It's a network. So when I think of like the internet, and I got to grow up, I grew up in the 90s, right? So I saw the digitalization of everything. I saw like the internet, email, phones, cell phones, right? And when you think of the internet, like if one company had all the computers and had like all the internet connections, they had 800,000 computers on the network and nobody else had any computers, the network's not that valuable. The more businesses that are on the Bitcoin network, the more valuable it becomes for everybody on the network. So there's, I think, a tremendous amount of importance for every business of every size to participate, just like every size business participates with a phone, right? Every business has a phone number that you can call. Everyone has an address that you can email them. Everyone has a website that you can go. Everyone should have a Bitcoin allocation, and it's irrelevant really the size. It's like, if you don't have a website, you're probably not going to be the top business in your field, in your industry. You can't be the top business in your industry without a website and a phone number. Um, and the same will become true for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin will allow optionality. It will allow you to borrow money to do the expansion, to buy more inventory, to buy more real estate, whatever your business is. And it gives you optionality, and it gives you, you know, just, peace of mind, really.
Yes, of course. And when did you start with the Bitcoin accumulation?
So yeah, sorry, I didn't answer that. I know you asked that. We started July of last year, July 29th. So we're coming up on our first year. And when we first kind of like put pencil to paper, we were thinking we could get 5 Bitcoin. And we were thinking that was through our free cash flow, right? That we had some cash reserves that we were going to use, and that we were going to be able to generate enough income to buy 5 Bitcoin in the course of 12 months. But like I was talking about earlier, with what we were able to do with this non-recourse loan, was we're approaching 15 Bitcoin. So we exceeded our goals. And when you think about that from a Bitcoin kind of perspective, like if you look at any other self-storage operator on a square foot basis, like if you take, we're fun fact, we're 69,420 square feet on accident. We didn't even plan for it to be that way. And so if you take one of these metrics that we track is our square footage divided by our Bitcoin. How many Satoshis do we have per square foot? And we look at the total number of all real estate in the US, commercial real estate. It's about 97 billion. And if you divide it by 21 million, you know, um, you end up with something like 21,800. And we're like 300 sats away. We're at 21,500. And that's what that we think of as Bitcoin parity. We're reaching Bitcoin square foot parity, where we have secured our Bitcoin represented, in real estate. And yeah, but we're coming up on our 1 year, and we're extremely proud that we stuck to our goal, because when we started buying our first purchase, Bitcoin was at 118,000. And we bought all the way down. Being in Bitcoin before, it didn't really, scare us or anything. We knew what we were getting into, but we have lowered our average cost to around 84,000.
Excellent. And how do you manage this bear market when you say we buy no matter what, and we've been here before and we know what is happening? How do you manage the bear market to buy? You can buy more. You have another strategy. You take other loans.
Yeah. So right now we're working through a refinance. We have you know 1 year to refinance it. The balloon date, the loan comes due in August of next year, August of 27. But we're looking to refinance early, because we have this opportunity where Bitcoin is trading at favorable prices. So normally we would wait, because the loan is at 3.66%. And so it's a very attractive rate. And we would like to just kind of, keep it outstanding until it's due in August of next year. But given where we can accumulate Bitcoin compared to where will Bitcoin be in 12 months from now, that's something that we got to think about. Because with real estate, you get about one opportunity a decade to refinance your property normally. Sometimes if you do some value add or you have some edge, you can get 2 refinances in a decade. But most operators will get 1 refinance a decade, and they pull cash-free or tax-free cash out. And that's one of the most attractive things with real estate is when you do a cash out refi. And so that opportunity only comes around, once every 10 years. And we're trying to time that with this Bitcoin market and take advantage of these prices where we would, if we weren't in a big Bitcoin company or didn't have a Bitcoin allocation, we'd just let the loan continue its course for another 12 months.
And how important, because one of the things that I like the most from your company is when you do the releases that you buy Bitcoin, you talk about we bought 20,000 Satoshis or whatever in Satoshis. How important is for the people and small companies now thinking Satoshis instead of thinking in Bitcoin, especially from the motivation point, because now we know that it's very difficult for companies. I don't know if it's difficult yet, but for the people especially, it's difficult to buy one Bitcoin. So probably people get demotivated. I will never buy one Bitcoin. But how important is to think in Satoshi to keep motivated to buy more?
Yeah, I think it's very important. It's the unit of account for the network. So it's the smallest unit, and um, when you denominate things in satoshis, you show that it's obtainable for everyone. It's not that you have to buy a full Bitcoin, like you said. There's a lot of people. It's less common now. I think that there's been a lot of marketing to explain that you can buy a fraction of a Bitcoin, but it's hard to think in those fractions, right? In decimal places. So when you get rid of the decimals and you just think of an unit of account, it becomes easier to talk about, right? Like it becomes easier to talk about in Bitcoin terms. So you're normalizing Bitcoin, and you know the more that we talk about satoshis, the more relatable it's going to be to the common person. When you talk Bitcoin, I had a lot of people say, "Oh, that's rich people money." And there's this bias because one Bitcoin is so expensive, right? Like it is $60,000+ right now for one Bitcoin. But if you zoom out and you realize that for one penny, you can get right now, like, I don't know, what can you get, like 14 satoshis for a penny? So then
Yes.
it like puts it in perspective. And there's a lot of countries, I know that you're in a different part of the world than I am, and you're probably more aware of this than me because I'm American. But there's so many countries where maybe their country, one of their pesos, it doesn't even get one satoshi. They need 2 or 3 or 4 pesos to buy one satoshi, and that helps them understand a lot better than people in America, because they have privilege with the US dollar being, um, you know, for the longest time, the world reserve kind of currency when it comes to the oil trade, and it used to be backed by gold, and the whole 1971. Um, but it just makes it more relatable. It makes it more like it's just going to help with the Bitcoin education. When we try to abstract this from people, when we take it away, it makes it like we're hiding something. It feels like we're not being um, totally honest with people. Like we need to show that there is this unit of account within Bitcoin. And yeah, I'm rambling, but I think you understand.
Yes, I totally understand. And again, yeah, I'm in Hong Kong now, but I'm originally from Argentina. So I understand what you say because in Argentina now, I think that 1 peso is around 1 Satoshi. So with these prices, but yeah, it's interesting. And talking about the future of your company, what are your plans? What are your visions? You want, of course, I'm sure you want to keep growing your Bitcoin stack, but do you plan to get listed or something?
I think we're exploring everything, like all ways in which we can grow, and like if it makes sense, we'll take a look at it. And what I can say is that when we try to go out to do financial engineering with traditional banks and with private lenders, it seems that they're behind the curve here. And from what I see, paying attention to strategy, and when I look at the other companies that are publicly listed, it seems like retail is like the big supporter of all these companies, just like Bitcoin, right? Institutions are now coming after 17 years. For the first 16 years, it's been mostly retail, and strategy made announcements. I listen to their earning calls, and I listen to their press releases, and stay up to date on what they're doing. And um, sorry, I just kind of drew a blank for a second, but there, can you just try me again where we were?
No, basically, what I was asking you is, what are the future plans for the strategy for West Main Storage, the strategy, and what you're planning for the upcoming, probably next year or 5 years? You want to get listed on any stock exchange?
So yeah, let me try to answer that question again. So, yeah, we're looking at all the opportunities that are in front of us, all ways in which we can grow. And what we've noticed is that retail seems to be the main adopter of Bitcoin and digital credit, and just Bitcoin in general. And so when we go out in the private world to try to raise capital from banks and private lenders, we're having an extremely difficult time. So we're like, how can we do some financial engineering? How can we raise money? Like we've got to find a way. And we're hopeful that we can work with like our traditional bank partners now. We have some great partners that we work with across our whole real estate portfolio, and we're doing some restructuring. We're looking at how we can restructure the company to best suit Bitcoin, and how we can take on outside capital, and what steps we need to do to take on outside capital. And it's, there's a lot of rules and regulations that are unclear on, what we need to do to get there. And because we're a small company that doesn't have like a big team with lawyers and um, CPAs and tax guys, like we're at a disadvantage when it comes to trying to do something like that. But now that we have AI, we've been using AI, and that's a whole game changer. So we're pushing the limits and crunching, and just you know feeding the AI as much information as we can, so that we can have the best understanding that we can when we go talk to our lawyers, when we do talk, and we can really cut costs. Otherwise, we're spending all this time. And so we're hopeful that we'll find a way that we can, grow with the public, but we just don't know how we get there. We're still kind of researching what's available to us, and what financing we can tap into.
Excellent. And what advice you give to other business? I don't know if any of your friends or people who you know that are business owners approach you to give some advice. But what advice you give to business owners that they want to start Bitcoin Treasury strategy, but they are still hesitant?
Well, I think if you're going to, to like, accept Bitcoin, that's one thing. But I think you really want to start as an individual. Like if you're going to, offer it for your business, you want to have maybe a little bit better understanding, like so you can help your customers. Because if you're like, yeah, I'm going to offer Bitcoin, and then your customer is like, well, how do I pay you? And you don't know. So I think, step number one should be, you as the business owner need to understand it. You need to invest some time and understand how to use Bitcoin, and create a process that, if you have employees, that they understand Bitcoin as well. You need to have all the business owners and everyone at the business understand it to a certain degree. They don't have to be an expert overnight, but they should just have, a little skin in the game, even if it's like buying $10. Like you can buy like $1 worth of Bitcoin. The margins might be a little much, and you might want to, spend like, you know, more than $10 or something to try to um cut away at those margins. But that's the first step. And maybe do some transactions. A lot of exchanges support Lightning uh network, and you can do some test transactions and just with yourself. If you're going to have your own terminal, Square has a thing that's easy for people to use these days. But I think it's important that everybody start as an individual first and get comfortable with it enough to then, offer it at a business level.
And how do you see? Because we mentioned about Sailor in the episode, and there is a lot of there are a lot of critics that they say that it's not it's not good from Sailor to accumulate this amount of money of Bitcoin. As you are a Bitcoiner and as you are also into the Bitcoin Treasury space, what do you think about that when they say it's bad that Sailor accumulates X amount of Bitcoin?
Well, the first thing I think of, I try to separate Sailor from strategy, right? Those are two different things. He's already kind of stepped back, even though he's a large part and of the company. He's the chairman now. Fong Li is the CEO, but strategy is a company and it has tons of shareholders. So you have a company is just a bunch of individuals together. The other thing I think of is Satoshi, has the largest amount, right? 1.1 million Bitcoin, and nobody had a problem with that. And rightfully so, because like we discussed earlier in the episode a little bit, just because you have X amount of Bitcoin, that doesn't give you any extra power over the network. So if I thought that, one company having over 1 million Bitcoin was a a problem, I think Bitcoin just wouldn't work, right? Like that, like I think it's okay for a single entity to have a significant stake of the network. We've seen it before. There was individuals in the past that had hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin, and over time they were unable to hold them, right? And that's part of the decentralization of the network, right? They have all this Bitcoin today, but something in the future, we just saw that they sold 32 Bitcoin as a test transaction. And look, we're looking at potentially, what if we sold some of our Bitcoin? Right now, our Bitcoin is down on average about 25% from our average cost basis. So we have like a $300,000 loss right now, and it's staring at us in the face. And all we have to do is do a few clicks of the mouse, and we can have that tax loss. So like we're thinking about these things, and there's a difference between an individual and a business, right? The business, you're doing whatever is of interest for the shareholders. And normally that's holding on to as much Bitcoin as you can. But if they have to sell Bitcoin to pay expenses or obligations, that will help further decentralize the network. And if they can actually hold on to the 1 million Bitcoin that they accumulate for 100 years, that will be amazing. that will be tough. Like once you get that much Bitcoin, it becomes tough to just keep them in your possession. Right. So like, I just think that like they've worked incredibly hard to be able to accumulate that Bitcoin, and they did it on behalf of a lot of shareholders. It's not just the management team. The management team is working for all those shareholders, and there's tons of people. And I think these are a lot of investors that would otherwise not be in Bitcoin, right? Like, I think it's important to have your own Bitcoin first before you go and venture out and have digital credit or strategy or any of these treasury companies. I think the most important thing is to have the underlying Bitcoin and understand that that's your foundation, that's your framework. But at the same time, like you gotta do what's best for the business. But back to your question about their amount, I don't think it's an issue. Um, it might be different if they had 20 million Bitcoin. You
Yeah, of
know,
course. Yeah, but at the end of the day, as as you say at the beginning, it's not good for them as well, because if you own all the computers in a network, if you own all the dots of a network, the network does not work. So the network only works if it's decentralized, if it is decentralized. So the only way for the critics, the only way you can do is go and buy more Bitcoin. When they buy more, if strategy buy more, price goes up, and we all benefit on that. So that's the point.
yeah, I think what you're saying is everyone in Bitcoin is working for everyone else in Bitcoin. So, um, you know, if you buy Bitcoin, there's hundreds or if not thousands of entrepreneurs working in the space now to build on top of Bitcoin, to build Bitcoin infrastructure, whether it's digital products, whether it's mining, whether it's services or software. They're building out the network, and that has positive benefits for every single participant. And so I think what they're doing is an incredible service because they're spreading awareness, right? Even if that's your first point of contact is strategy, like that, maybe you buy strategy first, but then you're like, wait, why don't I just own Bitcoin? And you get, and I personally don't think, it's wrong to diversify into Bitcoin companies. I mean, I might be biased because I do run a Bitcoin company, but I think that if you're knowledgeable in Bitcoin, if you have a good understanding, you know how to run a node, you can run Lightning channels, you're sophisticated when it comes to Bitcoin. I think you should look at potentially integrating Bitcoin into another business because you have something to offer people. I think if anything, we've learned that there's a product market fit for Bitcoin businesses to hold the Bitcoin for the shareholders. And you and I know that Bitcoin doesn't scale on chain to billions of users, nor does the Lightning Network. And so that means that there has to be custodians on the network for some other users. And Hal Finney talked about the Bitcoin banks, but that doesn't necessarily have to be a Fortune 500 corporation or a legacy bank. It can be your Bitcoin expert in the community. Maybe the guys at the local meetup, they start a business where even if it's like a simple business, like a landscaping business, right? Like um, any business can adopt it and apply it and just grow from there so much faster than they would otherwise be able to.
Talking about the community, you are in Middleton, Rhode Island. How is the situation of Bitcoin in your area?
It's actually doing surprisingly well. There's, a Rhode Island Bitcoin meetup. They meet once a month on the first Thursday of the month. at different locations around the state. We have Dan Hershey from Rhode Island Bitcoin Policy Institute, who was on our Real Estate Standard podcast a couple months ago now. He's been advocating for Bitcoin and Bitcoin regulation in the state of Rhode Island, pushing for a de minimis tax exemption for Bitcoin payments up to a certain amount. And we're trying to get clarification on state rules and legislation pertaining to both Bitcoin and AI. So we have actually a community of Bitcoiners. We're the smallest state, and Dan pointed out to me that we're ranked 49th for business in the US right now. So we're at the bottom of the leaderboard, but it looks like there's hope for us to actually to grow. And maybe being at the bottom is like, the match that kind of lights the fuse here for us to climb to the top of the leaderboard.
Excellent. And talking about the future of Bitcoin, what do you think about the future?
I get really excited. I know this is, frowned upon somewhat when it comes to the hardcore, like cypherpunks, but the Bitcoin as collateral, I think, is the most interesting thing to me. Being a real estate guy, property is collateral. It's like the best form of collateral that we have, and Bitcoin is classified by the IRS as property, and so that makes it eligible to be used as collateral. And you hear people say it's pristine collateral because if something happens and you need to sell your real estate, it's going to take like 60, 90 days at best, right? You're going to have to the buyer's going to, unless you have a cash buyer that waives all their contingencies, which would be kind of crazy and reckless for somebody to do, they're going to get financing contingencies, and they're going to want appraisals, and they're going to want environmental studies. They're going to want to make sure what they're buying doesn't have any skeletons in the closet. And so the liquidity with that is there's some friction there. With Bitcoin, if you default in a loan, or if somebody needs to liquidate, you hear everybody say you can sell it on a Sunday for like a less than a % fee. And we do on-chain transactions somewhat regularly, and a lot of them been one sat per V byte there, so they're extremely cheap to send Bitcoin on the network on chain and have a global settlement. And it's extremely fast. In 10-minute blocks, I know there's a lot of talk about that being inefficient, but when you compare that to legacy financial settlement, it's orders of magnitude faster.
Excellent. And the last question is, if you had the chance to sit down with Satoshi Nakamoto, what would you ask, or what would you say to him, to her, or to them?
Well, I know that Bitcoin had a poker client in Bitcoin in the early days, so I'd probably ask him if he wants to play heads up.
Amazing. Kenny, thank you very much for your time. Anything else you want to add, and how people can contact you?
I'm on X, and it's Kenny_Alves, ALVES. And that's a good place to reach out. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to kind of see what your audience thinks about what we're doing.
Yeah, thank you. As I was telling you again, we are big supporters of what you do, because you are an example. You are setting an example of that. Again, you don't have to be a strategy. You don't have to buy, because many people that are new in the space, I remember 1 or 2 years ago, a friend of mine asked me, is it possible to buy less than 1 Bitcoin? So he thought that you just need to buy 1 Bitcoin. So many people that is not that are not still in the space, they think that they just need to buy, they must buy 1 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoin, 3 Bitcoin, while you can buy Satoshis, and it's the same game. So again, and we are huge fans of what you're doing, and we hope to have you in the future telling us that you are scaling. I always put the example. I always talk about. I don't know if you heard about Smarter Web Company.
Of course, I met Andrew in New York. Yeah, I love those guys.
Well, I came 2 weeks ago from their Treasury and conference in Bristol, and I always put them because they are the stories. They are a family business running a web development, web design business that after going into a Bitcoin Treasury company, in 1 year, they end up listed in the London Stock Exchange. So that's the way. And again, also we like the stories like you, that you're a totally like a self-storage business using Bitcoin to benefit from to make better operations. So again, I appreciate a lot of what you're doing, and I hope to have you in the future, probably talking that you are stacking more, or or you end up listed, or any good things for your business. I wish you the best and have a great day.
Thank you so much. Always happy to be a guest on your show.
And thank you very much to everyone who is on the other side. If you like the episode, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, follow us on social media, because doing so, you help us a lot to keep painting the world orange. Share this episode with the people you love. Share this episode with the people you hate, because we must reach 8 billion people and give them the orange pill. See you in the next episode. Stay humble, stack sats, and remember, we are all Satoshi.